For this month's Star Wars review, I thought I should do something that honors Valentine's Day, which I'm fully aware happened last week, so don't even bother pointing that out. But this novel that I'm going to be reviewing is one that covers themes of love and marriage and starting a family together. All that fun stuff. And with that, I will be reviewing a very early novel in the expanded universe, The Courtship of Princess Leia by Dave Wolverton. The book that depicts the epic event that Star Wars fans everywhere were waiting for. Han Solo and Princess Leia tie the knot. And I've said before in previous videos that Han Solo and Leia was, for a guy that's not a huge romantic and not much of a sweetie when it comes to that type of stuff or shipping or anything like that, Han Solo and Leia, they're my couple. They're my fictional couple. I love them to death. I love them together, and a book that depicts them getting married is one that's definitely worth reading. Now, granted, the Thrawn trilogy had already come out, which that book depicts them giving birth to Leia giving birth to their twins, so they'd already been married at that point, so we knew that the marriage happened. But this is a nice little tale, nice little in between the Thrawn trilogy and Return of the Jedi, where we get this big moment where Han Solo and Princess Leia get married, and it was a very, very rocky road to get to that point. As a bit of a monkey wrench is thrown into their relationship, as this prince from this secluded area of the galaxy is offering all this help to the New Republic. Actually, it's his mother and his government are offering all this help to the New Republic with supplies and starships and military weapons, anything to help them drive away the Empire, or what's left of the Empire. And part of the deal is that Princess Leia would have to marry Prince Isildur. Sounds like Isildur from Lord of the Rings, but Isildur, whatever, something like that. And he is quite the charmer, and that's one thing I admire the book for. They didn't make him a snake, and they didn't make him a jerk. He's actually like a really nice, charming guy, so you would see why Leia, in addition to like all these benefits to the New Republic, why she would consider leaving Han for Prince Charming over here. And basically, the majority of the story is set on Dathomir as Han tries to win Leia back, but it's all in the middle of this gigantic crisis that's going on Dathomir because the planet is under the control of an Imperial warlord named Warlord Zinj. That's how I've always pronounced it. So Warlord Zinj is the main villain of this thing. And Luke Skywalker does some investigating on Dathomir and comes across the Witches of Dathomir, which would be expanded on greatly in shows like Clone Wars, where, you get the Night Sisters and the whole backstory for Asajj Ventress and all that other fun stuff. So this is a very important novel for us EU fans, because it started a few things. It gave us the huge moment of Han Solo and Princess Leia tying the knot. Ultimately, they end up falling in love all over again and realizing that they were meant to be together and ultimately decide to get married. But I think what this book does really, really well is that it really does capture like some of the comedic voice of the original films, particularly the first movie. Like the interactions and kind of the funniness and the snappy dialogue between the characters, like the main characters like Han and Leia and Luke and C-3PO and R2-D2 and Chewie and all that. It really does feel like it was pulled from A New Hope, and it does kind of capture that old kind of those funny interactions that they had way back in the original film. So it feels very natural for the most part listening to them, and the things they do to expand on the mythology, like adding what would ultimately become the Night Sisters, but the Witches of Dathomir, and expanding on some Force users outside of the Jedi and even the Sith, really opened some doors, and the expanded universe was able to get a lot of mileage out of it, as we would see obviously in Clone Wars. But Dathomir is actually also significant. It's the homeworld of Darth Maul, so this is it probably wasn't apparent at the time, but this secretly became one of the most important Star Wars novels because they derived a lot of material from it. So I credit the book for a lot of things. I think it's fairly well written for the most part. I like the interactions between the characters. I like some of the elements that they introduced and that were ultimately expanded on. Any negatives against the book? There are two that come to mind. The character of Warlord Zinj. Not that he's a bad character or a bad villain. Part of the problem that the expanded universe had, though, as future authors came on board after Timothy Zahn, I felt like I've criticized... well, when I saw Force Awakens, I criticized that movie for basically just doing the Emperor and Darth Vader again, with Emperor Snoke, or Supreme Leader Snoke and Kylo Ren. It's like, oh, it's kind of a recreation of Darth Vader and the Emperor again, and a lot of books did that with whenever they had a dark side user as the villain, it would ultimately, most of the time, would feel like a recreation of Darth Vader. And however, after the Thrawn trilogy, it felt like a lot of authors tried to create their own version of Thrawn. After Thrawn was so well received, it felt like a lot of authors tried to like, oh, well, I'm going to make my own supreme military commander. That's great. And Zinj is a bloodthirsty tyrant, and the ends justify the means, no matter how brutal it is, and a very violent character. So he's fine in that regard, but again, he's just kind of like, he pales in comparison to Thrawn. I think what set Thrawn apart from the rest was the level of detail they put into, or Timothy Zahn put into describing his thought process and why he does what he does and how he comes to the conclusions that he comes to. He's very much, like I said, he's like Sherlock Holmes as a military leader. And I think a lot of the other ones that came that followed Thrawn were just kind of like, I'm a vicious imperial blah 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 blah, kill the rebels type. You know, you had Admiral Dala, who they tried to make into like a female Thrawn, and she was all bark no bite. She was extremely unsuccessful. And don't even get me started on on Trioculus. I'm not even gonna go there. That's another review for another time. But a lot of those like military-based villains in Star Wars didn't fare as well because we already had the perfect one in Thrawn, and a lot of those admirals and supreme leaders and warlords just paled in comparison to Thrawn. Izard from the X-Wing book, same thing. It's like, yeah, she's fine for these stories, but I'm comparing her unfavorably to Thrawn. She's just not as good as Thrawn. It's just how it is. She's cold and calculating and vicious, but there's not that same level of intrigue behind the thought process and the motivations that Thrawn has. So, but Zinji's, for this one story, I think he's fine, and he would be mentioned and come up a few other times, but yeah, not one of the more memorable villains, at least not for me. Again, like, my favorite Star Wars villains are obviously Vader and the Emperor, Prince Caesar, Thrawn, and then, like, any of the cool-ass bounty hunters, like Boba Fett or Cad Bane or anything like that. I guess Asajj Ventress, although I'd say she was more of an anti-hero. But, yeah, my other major complaint with this book, and it's a doozy. It is a doozy. I know some people that hate this book because of this one moment. Okay, so to try and win Leia back, Han Solo wins a deed to Dathomir, which he was basically conned into because Zinj already has control of Dathomir, and Han kind of got swindled into buying a deed that's worthless, but he was going to give it to Leia as like a refuge for Alderaanian refugees. Aw, isn't that sweet? But it was ultimately worthless, and then Han, as a last-ditch effort to try and win Leia back, decides to shoot her on stun, mind you, on stun, but how many guys would get away with stunning their girlfriends and basically abducting her and then working out a deal? It's like, okay, I've abducted you, I've taken you away from Isildur, let's play this game. It's like, give me so-and-so time to see if I can win you over again, blah, 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 all this other stuff. I'm like, motherfucker, you just kidnapped her, what the fuck? Han, what are you doing? I don't know, that seemed a bit extreme to me, and it's a bit out of character for Han. I feel like if Han were going to do something like that, he would, like, trick her into something. Like, she needs to go on some diplomatic mission somewhere, and he swindles his way into becoming the pilot of the ship to take her where she needs to go, or, you know, oh, we're going on this routine mission, oh, let's take a detour, and, like, you know, Han would, I don't know, like, him shooting Leia, even if it is on stun, feels a bit extreme to me. But I know some people that hate the book just because of that one moment, but if you're willing to ignore that one very, very extreme moment, I think the rest of the story works fairly well. It works just fine. So I do think it's an entertaining book. I think it's a fun read. Couple of missteps keep it from being an absolutely perfect read, but it is enjoyable, and I do recommend picking it up. Just for Han and Leia getting married, which is a big deal, and also as it was kind of a starting point for various other things like Dathomir, Homeworld of Darth Maul, and Asajj Ventress and the Night Sisters and all that other fun stuff. So I think it's a worthwhile read and worth checking out. So that concludes this review for this month. Join me next month when I'll do my next Star Wars book review. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the little bell down below to get notifications on my Star Wars, Godzilla, and wrestling-related videos and what other random crap I feel like doing. Who knows? I'm weird. I just like to talk about shit here on YouTube. So that is all I have for you now. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you all later.